don't know about y'all, but damn, I miss the 90s. I miss them in a way that I hope when the aliens come, they have plans to drop us all off in a universe where it's always 1998. It was the last time that things felt normal, right? Less unprecedented historical events, less stimulus overload and technology. And don't get me wrong, we've come a long way since then, but man, oh man, I miss it. So what is it for you? What's the one thing from the 90s that lives rent-free in your mind? Me, you ask? It's those cheap-ass juice bottles that had the foil cap on them, and it was just like pure sugar with some food coloring in there. Give me one of those and a pack of Dunkaroos, and I'm a completely different person, y'all. Or anytime Get Low comes on, I don't care if it's a birthday or a wedding or a funeral. My serotonin skyrockets to the point that I have no other choice but to shake my ass and point my hands in the air at whatever's on my left and right. I feel like it's one of the very few things that can completely alter the mood of a millennial in an instant. 90s nostalgia. It's like a fire that gets reignited in us. So that's what we're talking about today on the Millennial Reset. We are taking a trip down memory lane to a time when life felt simpler and more carefree. And maybe figure out why we all long for the 90s so much. And more importantly, how we can reclaim that same feeling again in today's crazy world. So join me as we indulge in some nostalgia, maybe share some laughs and tears, and who knows, maybe even do a little bit of healing. For those of you that are new here, I'm Peter Goose, your millennial mindset mentor, former teacher turned burnt out corporate millennial, and after spending a couple of years relearning self-care and how to rewire and reparent my brain for a reality that's aligned to my own values and goals instead of the ones I was conditioned for, I've decided to make my healing journey public for the sake of building community and making whatever impact I can have on others who are on this same path. So let's start with why is it that we all miss that time so much? Maybe it's the fact that it was the last time we didn't experience a constant onslaught of unprecedented historical events every other day. It was a time of comfort and security for so many of us. That period before the major global and economic upheavals that have defined much of our adult lives. Or maybe it's the fact that it was the last time that mindset that we were all raised with, that hard work pays off, actually worked. Or maybe it's something even deeper than the surface. Whatever it is, life has done a complete 180 since the days of yore of the 90s. Whether it's a certain song or a commercial or Saturday morning cartoon or early stage technology like Amazon Trail or Furby or Tamagotchi, it all evokes that shared certain vibe and mood. And the bottom line is we miss it and we want it back. And while we can't get the actual experience back, I do think there's a couple of ways that we can get that feeling back. But what might that look like in today's crazy modern world? I think that there's three things we can all be doing today and every day that would get us closer to that feeling that we all miss. So let's start off with number one. If you think back to the 90s and the early 2000s, our interactions were mostly face-to-face. And sure, there was earlier social media like AIM and MySpace and some of the earlier ones, but nothing like it is today, right? And with so much less technology running our lives, we spent more time having real connections with real people in real environments. But there's the advent, of course, of smartphones and more social media and instant messaging, and much of our communication has shifted online. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but I think that this shift has led to a decline in meaningful in-person interactions. And I think that's just one thing that so many of us want back. This, lack of face-to-face connection has driven a lot of us into self-isolation. Despite being constantly connected online, I think that a lot of us feel lonelier than ever because, online interactions can lack the depth and connection of real life conversations, which can leave us feeling disconnected and unsupported and no real space that we feel like we belong. And it's this same isolation that can exacerbate the feelings of anxiety and depression and loneliness, making it harder to form and maintain meaningful relationships. But damn, Daniel, making friends in your 30s is a challenge. And I think one of the things I miss most about the 90s is the real connections. Not the text or the DMs or comments on social media, but the face-to-face connection. And don't get me wrong, there's a lot of people I don't want to talk to anymore and rather just stay inside. And let's be real, it takes a lot more energy for social interactions these days than it did back then. But when we're all in that same mode of self-isolation, it becomes even more of a challenge to meet new people because all we see is our own experience, where we begin to feel like it's just us because we're not able to connect with each other to realize that it's not. So how do we begin to reconnect and build new connections? I think it's a little bit more complicated than just getting out more, right? Especially for those of you that are like me that have this sort of weird social anxiety since quarantine. So I like to think about it as a gradient, right? Starting off with something that's low risk. Maybe it is connecting online, but then finding ways for those online conversations to turn into in-person conversations. I barely use Facebook anymore, right? But I love joining different groups, some that are more local to me and others that are just shared interest. And especially for the local groups, there tends to be a lot of opportunities for open social events where it's a lot of other people going by themselves. And by the way, if you're not already part of the Burnt Out Millennials Club on Facebook groups, then consider this your invitation to join, besties. It's still growing, but it's a great place for us to just come together and feel a sense of belonging at least. And if there's not already gatherings being held, then maybe start with hosting something yourself. I recently met up with some local San Diegans from a Facebook group for a hike, which was really cool, actually. Something I was terrified of. But hiking is something I normally do by myself anyways, and it doesn't require a whole lot of social interaction. And, if you end up liking it, then do it again. And if you don't, then try something different. So I think that's number one, looking for whether it be online local groups or clubs or things that align with your interests. Maybe it's a book club or a sports team or a hobby group, and then working your way up the gradient, right? From online connections to meeting up with those same people in person. And I think the key here, y'all, is to prioritize these face-to-face interactions and to create opportunities for genuine connection so that, we can find our people, to at least realize that you're not alone in feeling alone and that there are still people out there that are worth leaving the house for. So that's number one, developing more genuine connections. And number two, speaking of technology, let's think again back to the 90s, right? We found joy in simple pleasures, playing outside, enjoying Saturday morning cartoons, or just more hands-on activities in general, right? But today, our lives are filled with constant digital distractions and an overwhelming amount of choices, making it harder to appreciate the simple things. And when you really start to think about it, with smartphones and social media platforms, it's drastically changed how we spend our time and how we get our dopamine hits. Instead of engaging in activities that promote long-term satisfaction, I think a lot of us have become addicted to the instant gratification of likes and comments and endless doom scrolling. And, there's no need to beat yourself up for all this, but it's that bad dopamine that is quick and fleeting and often leaves us feeling even more anxious, distracted, and dissatisfied. And over time, this bad dopamine has a few different negative effects on us. Number one is reduced attention span, because this constant bombardment of information makes it really difficult to focus on any one task for a prolonged period. And, y'all probably see this too, like how many of us are getting diagnosed with ADHD well into adulthood. And I'm not saying that like social media is the cause, but I'm positive that it's not helping. There's also increased anxiety and depression, right? Because of this comparison culture fostered by social media. We find ourselves feeling inadequate, which leads to low self-esteem and self-confidence. And that feeling that I think all of us millennials are familiar with, that others are doing more or have more than you. So you start pressuring yourself and comparing yourself to them. And the last one here that I don't think a lot of people are talking about is the sleep disruption that comes with technology addiction. Because, literally the blue light from our screens and that habit of late night doom scrolling can interfere with our natural sleep patterns, which of course can lead to not only poor sleep quality, but overall health. But the thing is it's these same cheap, quick dopamine hits that are causing us to stay separated and living through a screen. And, again, I'm not saying that we should all delete our TikToks and Instagrams, but maybe it's just a little light digital detox so that we can get back to those things that we used to do that gave us the sustained dopamine. And it's not an easy one to hear because doom scrolling is one hell of a way to spend a day. And sometimes, let's be real, it's all you have the energy to do, right? But none of us have the motivation for the things that really matter when our dopamine tanks are running on empty because we waste it all on cheap hits meant to distract us from real life. So it's really about breaking the cycle. So, how can we do that realistically? Let me just start by saying one of the toughest boundaries to set and keep is the one with yourself. So start small with this. Maybe it's using your phone's built-in settings to limit the amount of time you spend on social media apps each day. Or maybe it's designating certain areas of your home, like the bedroom or the kitchen, as tech-free zones to encourage more face-to-face interactions and restful environments. Or maybe it's as simple as setting a specific time where you step away from the screen. This could be as simple as taking a 5-minute break every hour or two. Stretch, go for a walk, or just do some deep breathing. And as you create more safety for this new way of doing things, then maybe down the line you start building in 1 day a week to completely disconnect from all digital devices and use that time instead to engage in offline activities that bring you joy and relaxation. But again, start small. Don't start with that if you're like I was and completely addicted to my phone. Because, good, effective boundaries start off small. Your mind will not allow your body to do things differently when the change you're trying to create is too big and too scary. So yes, let's spend more time interacting in person and less through a screen. But even when we're not interacting with each other, let's at least recognize what social media is doing to our brains so that at least we're more aware of it. I know for me, I used to spend multiple hours of my day just scrolling. And, don't get me wrong, I still do sometimes, but I'm able to catch myself now before it turns into, an endless doom scroll. And the reason I'm able to call myself out now is because I'm now aware of what's happening in my brain that, nobody ever teaches you. That those bad dopamine habits drain your brain of the dopamine that you're going to need to actually get real things done in your life. And again, don't beat yourself up and shame yourself for it if it's you, but I would highly, highly encourage y'all to look into the research of social media and bad dopamine as a way to, again, just make yourself more aware of your habits. And then finally, number 3. This one might seem a little bit weird, but I think it's one of the things we miss most about the 90s is simply the memories. I miss spending all day outside in the summers riding my bike or meeting up with friends with no agenda. I miss going out to eat at Chili's and Applebee's where people actually talk to each other instead of look at their phones, and roaming aimlessly around Blockbuster Video and going to Chuck E. Cheese for birthday parties. Now obviously, of course, we can't get Blockbuster back, unfortunately, but one of the really cool things about our brains is that it cannot tell the difference between a remembered event or an event happening right now. Your brain lights up in the same exact way. So, as simple as this might sound, remember to remember. Remember to remember those experiences that are tied to those positive feelings in your mind. By simply remembering and replaying those positive memories from your childhood, your brain is going to fire off neurons, making associations to how you felt in the past, even if you're not feeling that way right now. You can't get the experience back, but you can certainly get that feeling back. And I'll give you all a quick example of this. I am a huge Wheel of Fortune fan. And for those of you that don't know, Pat Sajak, the original host, just recently retired, which I literally cried uncontrollably over. Because, there's just something about watching those shows that we all used to watch back in the 90s and 2000s as kids that it just brings back a certain feeling. So, it was a rare occasion for me to miss the 7 o'clock Wheel of Fortune. It is one of the very few reasons that I kept paying for cable TV. And you better believe I'm still watching the reruns, even though I know I've already seen every episode, because it was my hit of serotonin. So whether it's watching your favorite shows from childhood or a playlist of all your favorite 90s and 2000s songs, or if you want to get really nostalgic, maybe you even go out and buy one of those apple pie candles that every suburbia American house had growing up. But what I'm saying is we can still bring back that same general feeling by literally creating experiences for ourselves, whether that be in our external world, or if that's not possible right now, then in your internal world that fosters that same feeling that we all miss so much. Because when you foster a specific positive emotion based on your past memories, that emotion then fosters new thoughts that are associated with that emotion. So now you're making that emotion even stronger and those thoughts even stronger. Y'all, this is neuroplasticity in action. Wiring your brain to soak in more of the good. And it's one of the easiest ways for us to create more peace and safety for ourselves. To simply remember those times from our past that made us feel that way. So go watch your reruns of your favorite childhood cartoons, or if you have pictures or home videos of you from that age, pull them back up. Remind yourself of that time in your life where things were simpler. Now, obviously, let me just say this is a very generalized strategy. If your childhood involved trauma, then maybe the 90s don't hold such great memories for you. And that's perfectly fine. Maybe it was a different time in your life where you have more positive memories than negative. Follow what feels right to you, because here's the bottom line. It's not even about the explicit memory, the things that actually happened. It's the implicit memory. The memory of the feeling, that's what really sticks. And if we can foster that same feeling in the midst of this chaotic and stressful modern day society, that's what allows us to shift out of this survival fight or flight mode that we've all been stuck in for the past several decades and into a mode of joy, of peace, of calm, of creativity and play. And when you shift your inner state, you shift how you respond to the outer state of things. Now, let's get something straight so that we don't get too delusional in all of this, right? The things that cause us to stress out, they're not going to go away. The world is still going to be crazy. It's chaotic out here. And things will probably never go back to the way they used to be, unfortunately. But we can still create the feeling by getting back together, having real connections away from our screens, by soaking in the good, even if it means just remembering the good from the past. Because you 100% deserve to remember what it feels like to not have to worry 24/7 about what's going to happen tomorrow. You deserve to remember what it feels like to be authentic you instead of survival you. And if nobody else has told you today, you are thebomb.com, all that in a bag of chips. You're my home skillet, and I am here in your corner raising the roof for you, bestie. So that is it for today's episode of the Millennial Reset. If you like what you heard, be sure to follow and subscribe wherever you listen. You can always learn more about the Millennial Reset and ways to support yourself with my self-directed program, the Millennial Mindset Makeover. It's specifically designed for millennials who are ready to take on the inner work of challenging your subconscious beliefs, stripping away the conditioning that keeps us stuck living this same repeat cycle of burnout, and start rediscovering that badass version of you that's been hidden away all these years. Learn more about that and other support options at www.themillennialreset.com. See you next time.